welcome to the very first episode of Life at Octopus, a show about the people who are basically bringing Octopus to life. Not just the products we make, but also the people, the principles, and the stories that shape how we work, lead, and grow together. In this episode, I've got Paul Stovell, one of the main people here at Octopus, the original founder and CEO of the company. We'll be talking, of course, as I said before, about all the stories and rich that Paul will be. But for episode 1, we thought we'd start where it all began, which is our founder and CEO, Paul Stovell. So Paul started Octopus as a side project back in 2011. And he wrote the first few lines of code himself, and he quickly turned that into a global DevOps platform used by thousands of teams around the world. And what makes Paul's story really interesting and special to me isn't just that it's the growth involved, etc. It's the way that he's built the company, the calm, bootstrapped, product-led, and deeply values-drawn company that is Octopus. And he's also someone who can renovate a house, build a fence, or rewire a circuit in his spare time. So mostly from YouTube videos, as he likes to see. And so whether it's shipping software or fixing a shed, Paul brings all of that to last. And so today we're happy to talk to him about what it means to lead people with purpose, the wins, the mistakes, and the mindset that shaped Octopus into what it is today. Paul, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate having you on.
Thank you. That's a really kind introduction.
Awesome. Well, let's get into it. So first and foremost, I've got to ask you, you're from a country town called Whyalla. Tell us a little bit about that.
I am. So Whyalla is a steel mining town. There's a big mine, a train right away, and then you can see the pictures of the factory there where they turn it into steel and then they would ship it out. When I was born there, I think it was about 20,000 people. And by the time I left, I think it was about 14,000 people. So my childhood growing up there, it was always a town that felt like it was declining. It was always getting worse in some way. And in fact, it was in the news quite a bit in the last year because that steel mine, I think, has collapsed, like financially collapsed for the third time or something in my lifetime. So it's currently being bailed out by the state government. So I grew up there. And there was something I was reflecting on with my wife, Sonia, which is like growing up in a town that is shrinking compared to where we live now. We live in Brisbane, which is a town that's been growing. Like Brisbane grows by 1,000 people a week or something. I think there's just a very different set of headwinds or tailwinds behind you. Like if you were to try and start a business in a town that's shrinking, life's just naturally going to be harder because there's less customers, less ability to get things. That's very different to being in a town that's growing. So yeah, it always felt like it was a town to try to get out of when I went to high school. But you look around and there's not a lot of role models, right? Because everybody works at the steel mill. And so you get a sense of when you think about your own future and what you can do, they're the anchor points you have, the reference points you have is what the people around you are doing. I think the internet changed that. So, the internet came along. We had a computer with a dial-up modem.
Nice.
I used to use it for playing video games. And then at some point you realize these computers, you can make them do things if you program them. And so I really got into programming, taught myself JavaScript initially, and then C++. This is back in the 2000s. And also started, I think, just reading a lot of material online from folks like Joel Spolsky and Eric Sink, building little software businesses, and started to realize like this is something you can do. Like I don't just have to work at a steel mill. I could do this for a living. And so that led to me, eventually, as soon as I finished high school, heading over to Sydney.
It's interesting that you mentioned Eric because he was actually one of the inspirations I had. He was a software developer at SourceGear, and they created their own source control repository. And when I saw this picture of Eric, I thought this is the type of guy for me. And I met Eric at TechEd back in 2002, 2001. And he's a great guy.
He is. And I think it reflected a period of time. So, as 2000 rolled around, you had the dot-com crash. And leading up to the dot-com crash, you had all this excitement around the internet and how the internet was going to change things, and pets.com and all of these things that were happening.
Yes.
And so venture capital developed a really bad name, right? Like this idea that we're going to pump all this money into these companies that aren't making any money.
Yeah.
Hand the bag to the next person, fire the CEO when things don't work. So VC had developed a really bad name. I think everybody was tired of it. So you had folks like Eric Sink, Joel Spolsky, other people where they were really great role models, because it's like, we're going to build some software that we're proud of. We're going to hire 3 or 4 people to work together on it. We're going to sell it for a bit more than it cost us to make. We'll reinvest the profits in making the company a little bit better. The profits, right? Like, crazy concept in the world of like startups. But that period in like post.com crash, there was no money flowing into technology. The only technologists, like the only people who pursued a programming career in like 2003, 2004 were people who loved to do it. They weren't there for the money, because there was no money left, right? Like the industry had packed up. And
Yes.
like that all built back up again come like 2015, 2016. Like we were back to sort of crazy times. But yeah, that intervening period, I think it was a very different way of thinking about software companies. And that very much informed how I thought about building Octopus.
So let's get into that. You obviously have detailed a lot of this on your own personal blog, which you can check out at paulstovell.com. You have a really good About Me section. So I have to ask, what moment, and I know you've shared this story before about how you started Octopus back in 2010. A quick search of your LinkedIn profile. I always like bringing up people's LinkedIns, because it's like going back into the archaeological dig of your one career.
Yeah.
And you were obviously at Credit Suisse and Redify, and you're building out software for doing deployments, etc. At what point did you realize that this thing that you're building should be a company?
So when I was like 18, learning to code, all of those things, I started doing a lot of open source work, and I used that to then land my first job in IT. And again, this is a period there weren't a lot of people hiring, but there also weren't a lot of people going into it because there was no money left. I think my first job in 2005 paid something like $25,000 a year. So you're doing it for the love of it at this point. When I joined, Mercantile Systems there at the bottom. But then after a year or so there, learning what I could, they had some changes of plans. I joined a couple of consulting companies, and so I would turn up at big banks and government departments as like the consultant, because I had this technology knowledge around how to do things with .NET, which was starting to really boom at this time. And of course, like, no one wants to take advice from a 20-year-old consultant, right? That's like, I wasn't being paid a lot, but was sort of overpaid from the point of view of the customer. Like, this young kid, what's he got to teach us? And so any ego that I had around like my skills as a software developer, I think really went onto the back burner. And I figured out that the only way to get any sort of appreciation or trust from the customer was to figure out how to get the thing that they wanted into production as quickly as I could, or at least, if not in production, into a test environment or something, so that they could experience it. And
Yep.
like the Agile Manifesto came out in 2000. Continuous delivery was starting to become a thing around the sort of 2005 2010 period. And so you could set up source code control, you could set up build automation, all of those things within a few days. And so for every consulting opportunity I would do, we would set up those things, right? Day one, set up Subversion or Git or um,
Source safe.
Source Safe or whatever. Yeah, exactly, right. And then we would do the same on the build server, and then
Yep.
you would spend like day 3 through to day 90 trying to figure out how to automate the test and production deployments before you could actually start to get anything.
Yep.
And at the time, you had these platforms like Heroku starting to come out, which were completely different to that general experience of how hard software deployment was. But you had to kind of move everything to Heroku, and a lot of apps could never run in that environment. And so I started thinking about this idea of Octopus and dreaming about it, and started working on it again as an open source thing. I love open source software, but these team-based tools that a lot of people use, they need documentation, and they need a really nice user interface. And if there's like one thing that almost defines open source, is like generally lack of documentation and lack of a good user interface, right? Speaking of, the really popular products don't have that problem, but most open source projects really do suffer from that. And so I thought, I'll try something different, inspired by the Spolskys and the Eric Sinks of the world. I'll try just charging a little bit of money for it. I was, by this time I'd moved to Credit Suisse, and I was sort of day rate consulting for them. Really well paying job, but really sort of unpleasant environment. So I would go home, work on Octopus, and if somebody bought a license, I would take the next day off consulting, and I would reinvest the time back in making the product that little bit better. And I did that for like a year, just kind of nights and weekends, random Tuesday here or there, building the product out.
What would you whisper to yourself on the launch of Octopus if you could go back? Is there something that you might advise yourself of, knowing what you know now?
In some ways, I'd be reluctant to change it though. There's a lot around. There's a big part of this which is like the hard work and everything that goes into it, right? The vision, all those things. There's honestly a huge portion of it is luck. There were periods where I probably you start to sort of not be sure anyone's going to care about this. But the community, like what was amazing is I started working on it as a hobby project and I started blogging about it. And I would show these screenshots of what I was developing, even though it hadn't really shipped, or I'd ship like an early beta version, and I would blog about the features I was working on. And every time I would write something, people would take the time to write a few comments about how useful that's going to be, or everything. And it was that I'd say actually probably the one thing would be like keep being transparent about what we're working on so people can see it, because the feedback from those people is the thing that gives you particularly when you start to disbelieve that there's any reason to keep working on something, just doing it publicly, people carry you forward.
So I'd like to shift gears and talk a little bit about leadership and culture, particularly around Octopus itself. So Octopus Deploy, founded in 2011, calm company, remote first. What makes it being a calm company mean to you, and how do you maintain that at scale?
I think if there's something maybe that drives Octopus a little bit, there's a handful of decisions I think we made fairly early on around, we're not trying to build a startup, we're trying to build a company. And what do companies do? They sell a product, and usually they make a small profit so that they can keep selling the product and stay in business. And so when Sonia, so my wife Sonia, we met, we were dating, we got engaged, and then as Octopus started to go from a hobby into a business, she joined and was running all the finance side of it, and she brought a real sort of discipline. I think if I'd said, "Hey, I'm going to go and try and raise $10 million and turn this into a startup," she'd be like, "What do you mean? Like you're not going to make a profit?"
Yeah.
And so that mindset really grounded us to just building a successful business from day one. Like Octopus has been profitable for like 12 out of the last 13 years or something. So that's like a fundamental part of our DNA. With that comes so much control over our destiny, right? Like if you think of like on a personal level, to be financially independent, how would that change like your relationship with when do you work, where do you work, your choices you make in life, right? Well, the same thing applies for a company. Like a company achieves financial independence when it's profitable. So yes, you want to grow it, you want to find more customers, because that creates room for people's careers to grow, and it's fun and new challenges and all those things. But you don't have to. Like if the market was to slow down substantially and Octopus stopped growing, well, that's fine because we've got a profitable business. It doesn't matter. Whereas for all of these startups, what you see is like they all raise so much money. It's a big repeat of what we saw play out in the 2000s. They raised all this money, big promises of like long-term growth. The growth doesn't come because the market slows down, the demand isn't there, for whatever reason. The investors' theory is we're going to invest a lot of money. We want to push these companies to grow really fast. And if they don't, we'd actually rather they close down quickly rather than drag it out for 10 years, slowly burning through money. And so they push the companies to grow faster. Like it's the perverse thing, but in a bad economy, the startups that are struggling to grow, instead of changing to become profitable, the investors demand that they spend more money faster to try and grow their way out of the problem, right? It's the plane is starting to crash and it's like, quick, burn the engines because maybe you can do that kind of thing, but you just hit the ground faster, right? Instead of kind of maybe gliding to a slow stop or something. Maybe bad analogy, but like so we don't have that problem. And so with that, not having that problem, you're able to create a kind of environment where like we're not building towards anything. It's not like it's totally fine for last week and next week to be terrible because we're trying to build this big thing to return to our investors. No, like I want last week to be a good week for us and for the employees, and I want next week to be a good week for everybody. And we don't have like let's optimize for that. We don't have to optimize for some long-term outcome, and that will come if it's meant to, and if it's not, we can at least look back and have enjoyed the last 500 consecutive weeks of building a company together in a sensible way.
not a not a big deal there. A little humble brag, 500 weeks plus, etc. That's awesome.
No, they're
I
not.
know
They're
that
not
you
all good
start.
weeks. They're definitely not all
That's
good
right.
weeks.
Like you started this thing obviously by yourself and with Sonia, and obviously you grew into being the leader that you are. Has that role changed for you? Is it something that you relish in? Like, do you see yourself as a leader, or just one of the other devs here on the team, etc.?
um, it's definitely changed over time. So when Octopus started, I was 25 years old when I when we turned it into a business, and I'd say my experiences with management had never been all that positive. And so part of starting like the when we started to hire people, it was a terrifying prospect because now you're becoming responsible for like other people's livelihoods, right? The decisions you make don't just screw up your own life, they screw up other people's. So we took a
Yeah.
long time to get comfortable with the idea of hiring people. And then as we did, um, we would sort of get to like the first 10 people or so. And I suppose by default, I was managing everybody, but I was kind of doing it in a way that just felt very natural to me. And I didn't really consider myself a manager. I'm trying to build something interesting. And if you come and work with me, not for me, but with me, we can build something interesting together. Right? I think was probably the way we approached it. And then we got to like 20 or 30 people, and I was like, I wrote this whole thing of like why we're never going to have managers because managers are bad. And then yeah, like 30 or 40 people later, it's like, oh, I just realized I'm managing everyone and I'm doing a really bad job and no one knows what they need to do and what success looks like, and I'm not happy with how things are going. So then I think we went through a period of actually, you know what, like it's kind of like sales. Like everyone's had bad experiences working with salespeople. That doesn't mean that definitionally you have to have a bad sales team. You can actually build a really good sales team, and you can build a really good management culture. And so I think instead of running away from it, we tried to lean into it and start to become really good. And so folks like Mike and others join, and that naturally I think helps to create a really healthy management culture. And I hope that's something that's defined us. Um, and then for me personally, I think there's a weird thing about being a CEO. Like if you think of like an engineering manager has managed like they've been an engineer, so they know what a
Sure.
good engineer does and
Yeah.
what to look for in a bad engineer. And the CEO almost by definition hasn't ever worked in all of the departments that report to them.
Yeah.
Like that's true for some departments, but like generally it's like really true for the CEO. So I've had to figure out like what does it kind of mean to do the CEO role particularly well. And it's a hard thing to role model on because the way that most CEOs act isn't really me. I'm not the outgoing guy. I'm not the person that's excited to go and host roundtables with customers, and I'm not the Steve Ballmer, throwing telephones at people to hold them accountable, whatever that means, kind of person. And you think that's what you should do, so you go through a period of time where you try and emulate the things that you think you're supposed to do to
Yeah.
be good at a role, and
Yeah.
just to realize like, okay, if that's what I have to do, then I don't really want to do it. Having a good coach at some point along the way, Simon Brown, who was an early Microsoft person, chairman of Redgate, we came across each other's paths a while ago, and he started actually being a coach for me for probably the last 6 years. I would suggest without every 2 weeks having a chance to just connect with him and vent and soul search around problems I'm dealing with, I probably would have quit a long time ago. With 350 people later, and it's changed so much. So
Yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting point you raised, which is one of the questions I have for you is how do you stay connected to all the things that are happening on the team? I know it's probably difficult, but on a day-to-day level, like, do you find yourself just wandering around like a doctor doing rounds, existing with patients, etc., and asking how's it going?
I think I've naturally been someone who can sort of compartmentalize and focus on things. So I would say I probably tend to and the CEO role works a bit like this anyway, naturally, I think. But like if you think within any company, there's a whole lot of things that are probably working well, and there's a handful of things that probably aren't, and probably only one of those things is going to make the biggest difference if the company can improve at that thing, or that new project that we're doing, or whatever it is that's going on. And so, like, if I look back at any year at Octopus, I've probably made heaps of small decisions. I've probably had a bunch of big ideas I've tried to make happen. Um, I've probably hired a bunch of people, but really, in any given year, there's only two or three things that made a difference. And so you're trying to maximize, I think, at any point in time, like what are those few things, and how do I focus on them, and not get kind of drawn into everything. But like as you know, like everything we do across the company happens in Slack, and so it's so easy to pop through all the different Slack channels, see what's going on, observe the culture, observe how people are communicating with each other, observe how much of it is cross-functional versus siloed. And what's cool is, like, I'll chime in on any of them, and people will chime in on other things, and other leaders and I will have an argument about a point, in the middle of the public Slack that everyone else can see, and
Sure.
it's not an argument that's negative. It's like I think one thing we really try and do, there's this idea that, like, if you and I had the exact same information and the exact same experience, then given a choice, we would both make this exact same decision, right? Most of the time. And so much of, I think, the way that we try to communicate at Octopus is allowing room to share those things, right? Like, if you and I are seeing something different, it must be because we've got a different experience or different data or something that we're working with. It's not about like my agenda versus your agenda. It's like, let's until we both come to the same conclusion, let's keep talking, because one of us is missing something, and the thing we're trying to optimize for is not me getting my way or you getting your way. It's what is the right path forward for the company, for our customers. Yeah.
One of the interesting things I was doing was just trolling through some of the commits. I brought up some of your commits from 2012. So this is back in the day when you were building out the product. And I just thought I would just show you like some of the things. You've got some really really impactful commits there. Sad Octopus, etc. Small UI change. I mean, these sound just like a developer, right? You sound like an everyman here. So
Yeah, I code. I fell in love when I was 18. You learn to code, and then the thing that clicks is, like, especially growing up without a lot in a small town, like almost every pursuit in life costs money, right? Like, if you want to be uh, a graffiti artist, you at least need money to buy the spray paint, um, and so code is like the exception. Like, if you have a computer, as soon as you have a computer, which was starting to become more common back then, everything else is infinite. Like, it's just time. Like even as an adult developer, like time, coffee, computer, and internet, and then the
what
only
else?
limit around it is like your time and your imagination. And you can build
Yep.
anything. Now, that's
Sure.
not true in like almost any other discipline, right? Like, if you're a bridge engineer, there's only so many bridges getting built every year. You're not just going to build one, a real one for fun. But like, if you're a software engineer and you're curious about building a Salesforce CRM, like, just build one. Just spend 10 years doing it and drink a lot of coffee, and you'll build one. And that's amazing. And so I always love coding and building stuff.
That's awesome. A friend of mine, Richard Campbell, who I'm sure you know, is, as I always quote him as the guy who said, computers are amplifiers. They'll either amplify your intelligence or they'll amplify your stupidity. So everything at scale is definitely
Yeah.
definitely relevant in that conversation.
There's also, like, I find this in like the construction and things I do around the house and everything. Like, there's a real pride and motivation in just doing something really well, even if no one else is ever going to see it. So, like, uh, y there's a picture there of like the framing of a garage, and like, maybe you accidentally knock a nail into the frame
Yep.
that isn't meant to be there, and it doesn't matter because you're going to close up the
No,
wall and no one's going to see it, but
but you're going to
you're
know it's
still,
there.
I'm going to know it's there. And so I'll
Yeah.
take the second to knock that nail back out that wasn't supposed to be there. And it's the same, like the most enjoyable thing of building Octopus. There's been lots of really good moments of it, but like there's these moments in the early days where you'd build some part of the user interface or something, and you're not working through a backlog of features you have to build. You build something because it's interesting to build and there's an idea you're exploring. And then you spend a few days just iterating on that thing. You know, I'm going to move those pixels over there a little bit. I'm going to add an animation here. I'm just going to like sand the edges off this part of the experience. And probably no one will care and no one's going to use it. And I'll delete it next week anyway. But it's just in the moment, it's just such a fun thing to do.
Yeah, it must be awesome just seeing where we are now and all the features that come about. I was going to ask you a little bit about this in the sort of realm of product and decision making. Obviously, you've deployed a whole company, so to speak, and that's obviously bolder than shipping to production, I guess. But you know, when looking at products, etc., and decisions around products that have been made, is there a particular product decision that you're most proud of, or even if it wasn't that flashy? You talked earlier about the nail in the garage frame that no one's going to see. But is there a feature that you thought was really cool that maybe didn't get a lot of praise?
There's been heaps of them over the years. There's features we built that I was convinced, would get very heavily
VHDs?
used. Yeah, I think there's some that I think like they really demonstrate, I think, how Octopus thinks differently about things. But for example, a while ago, many years ago now, we were going around looking at uh, customers who are using Octopus, and we realized that many of them were using Octopus not to deploy things, but to operate things. So they would sort of deploy a project to production, but
Mm,
what that project did is it sort of fixed something, or it, restored a backup, or it did some kind of operational task. And we realized that Octopus is at this interesting place where we understand the applications and the permissions and configuration and everything, and we understand all the production environments. We have this sort of unique access to them. Why don't we really lean in on that and create a place where people can build those kind of operational tasks well? And so we built the runbooks functionality in Octopus. And at the time, that was really unique because you have CI/CD. It's still true. You have CI/CD systems, and then there's operations systems, right? You use Jenkins and you use Ansible, and you don't sort of use one for the other, or you sort of shouldn't, and they're not really designed to be used for the other thing. And even within like Azure DevOps, right? It's hilarious, but like Azure DevOps doesn't do any ops. There's no ops in Azure DevOps. It builds and it has some basic release functionality, but you can't restore a backup to the production database from Azure DevOps. You have to go use a different product within Azure to do that. And so we built that in Octopus, and it's massive uptake. Everybody uses it. That's probably one. I think more recently, this is another insightful thing that we had, but like we shipped a whole lot of functionality around Kubernetes in the last couple of years. And one of those is, after we will deploy something to Kubernetes, we now show the live object status of the things that we've deployed. So even though we might have deployed it a week ago, you can see that the feature is the pods are running or not running. You can see what's going wrong with them. And what's really cool about that, if you think of that journey in most other CI/CD tools, you build and deploy something in the CI/CD tool, a whole lot of custom scripts. The build and deployment tool doesn't know anything about what it deployed. Like GitHub Actions doesn't know what a Kubernetes is, right? Like it
yep.
just doesn't exist within GitHub Actions. And so then what everyone does is like they've got to figure out, how do we give people access to like the Argo user interface or kube control in production? And that's a really bad idea, particularly in large teams. So with Octopus though, it's like one place that has those things, because we sort of understand that like life doesn't end once it's deployed to production. There's a lot of things that happen afterwards. And if you can see the project within Octopus, you can also be responsible for operating it. So there's a lot of things like that I think we're just really breaking new ground on sort of how CD products should work.
Fantastic. Shift gears a little bit, talking about people and growth. So, you can make the joke, between wiring your house and scaling a global team, which one's harder to debug? But when you think about the people that you've hired, you're managing now 300 plus people at Octopus. Who are some of the people at Octopus who have influenced your thinking the most?
Oh, a lot of people in a lot of different ways. I mean, I think like in the early days we would build out. We spend a lot of time sort of on product development, the R&D side of the business, and then over time, I think sales, marketing, etc., have become a bit more of our focus as we built those back out. And now I'd say I probably spend more time in the product space than
Mm.
in those spaces again. Um, what's really cool about Octopus is I think we do so many like company all hands where we just answer questions. There's people who've been here for a really long time now, 10 plus years, where I'll do something dumb from time to time, and I'll get a message from Shane Gill saying like, Paul, you screwed this up or something, right? And like I hired Shane when
Yeah.
Octopus was like 5 people, and now there's probably, I don't know, 5 layers of management between Shane and I. But Shane's still comfortable to tell me I screwed something up, and I still love to hear it. And because he's a very insightful person. Folks like Shane, folks like Michael Richardson, but also folks who have joined more recently, like Laura, our new design lead, has really great ways of thinking about how does Octopus not just focus on building new things, but take the existing things that customers buy us for and just incrementally get better at them all the time, which is, something that you tend to forget when you chase the new and shiny features.
Yeah. Yeah. Design's definitely one of those areas that I think most of us in the dev space do really, really badly at.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of room for improvement in continuously retooling user experience.
That's right. Sticking on that theme of people and culture, obviously, how do you so one of the questions I was thinking about, like as you're growing the team, was there a turning point on how you thought about hiring and or culture? What I mean by that is like, for the longest time, it seems like our culture has been rock solid. We have the handbook, which if you haven't seen, you can go to handbook.octopus.com. This is our public handbook, which we're pretty transparent in terms of, what it's like working at Octopus, etc. But was there a turning point? Like, would you say the handbook being published was a turning point for you in terms of culture and hiring, or was there something else that you saw along the way?
Yeah, writing and publishing the handbook was useful because I think it helped people understand what they were getting in for when they joined, and they could sort of select whether it made sense to join. I think one of the challenges becomes, so the company for the longest time was R&D people only, and then we added support people, and then over time we started doing sales and marketing. And you fall into the trap, I think, sometimes of doing these new things the way everyone else does them, but it's not really true to sort of how we want to treat our customers, or um, just sort of true to the way the rest of the company works. And so you do this thing where I think you try to figure out what the right balance of those things are, and what you can learn, because you don't want to assume you know everything, but you
Mm,
also don't want to forget what makes you you. Um, and so, like, I think as far as it affects the culture, I mean, it's a little bit unfair to say, but like, there's no hiring process that's perfect. Like, it's you do your best, but you'll never get 100% success rate in hiring. So I think often culture kind of gets built and solidified based on the bad decisions you made because you hired the wrong people. And it's not that those people are bad, right? It's not them, it's you. Like, the hiring process was imperfect, and
right.
we hired someone who was great at their previous job, is great at the next job they've gone to, but for the time at Octopus, they were the wrong. It was a bad fit. Like, it was a bad fit
Mm,
between the two of us, and um, I think those are the less, like, they hurt. If Because I got asked once, like, the low points of building Octopus, as if like we did this big launch and it went badly and stuff, and
yeah.
like, I just look at those things as like degrees of not succeeding yet versus succeeding, but none of them keep me awake. Like, we build and ship a feature and no one uses it. Oh, well, maybe they'll use the next thing. I don't stay awake worrying about that. What's always, like, I think, you know, been like a bad day for me or a bad year for me has been we hired someone who was great at their last job, but just
Yep.
isn't a fit at Octopus, and that's on me because I got it wrong. And maybe they went on to hire 5 or 6 other people who also, aren't the right fit, and it has to be, the situation has to change. and like you've screwed it up, and so you really soul search those things of like, what are the lessons from it, how does
Yeah.
that sort of build up the culture, and also I think like over time the rest of the company culture kind of gets good at both selecting for that during interview process, like you learn from it. So I don't know, it's probably a bit like you learn what you want in a partner based on the bad relationships you had. And again, it's not
Sure.
because the other person is bad, it's just not a fit. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
It does. It's like you're not perfect and your partner's not perfect. The question is, are you perfect for each other? And
Yeah.
sometimes it's a, is it a good fit? And I've always said life is about relationships. And so that's always tough. And you can learn from all the scar tissue that you collect over time by making mistake after. Do you think that developers are a little bit different though? Do you think like I don't know about you, but I find developers to be a special breed of humans, so to speak, because they can be so intelligent and so nuanced and so pedantic at the same time. Like I consider myself a developer and I suffer from these constantly. So it's always a challenge, I guess, to hire for engineers who are going to have a strong fit as well culturally.
That's true. And yeah, they are built different. Like I get to spend time with people in our sales team, our marketing team, and our R&D teams, operations, finance, every department, and they're all nobody's worse or better than the rest. But they're very different. I think
Yeah.
like uh, I think, for example, like let's say you're rolling out some kind of change. Like if I just announced everyone has to do timesheets next week, right? Like
Yeah.
some
Okay.
requirements come in, we all have to do timesheets. Yeah, don't want to get ahead, but like just pre for next week. Okay, so timesheets are coming in. We've all got to do it. Like I know the reaction from the sales team would probably be like, "Oh, it sucks." Okay, and they'll sort of just get on with it and do the timesheets, and they won't be excited about doing it. They'll probably not want to do it. They'll find excuses to not do it because they're busy
Sure.
trying to sell it.
Yep.
So that they would accept the fact that it's changed. They wouldn't let it ruin their day so much. They wouldn't question it too much. Uh, you know, the R&D team would be totally opposite. Like I'd have to write a 15-page memo about why timesheets are needed
Yes.
and the importance of them, and then we'd have like three other documents that would need to be done, and someone would suggest maybe we could do the timesheets in GitHub, and there'd be like some proof of concept thing, and like, and then but at the end of the whole thing, they would understand why timesheets are so important, and the timesheets would get done. And that's like does that make sense? And it's not that they're
Yeah.
worse. It's delightful to work with all of them, but it's
Yes.
different. You can't take one approach and assume it's
Yeah,
gonna
there
it's
are
gonna
no blind
work.
spots with developers. They will definitely debate things right down to the nth degree, which is great to see. And on that note, with developers, they typically, I mean, I know, speaking for myself, a lot of developers typically are very insular in terms of their work. Like they're very much like heads down. I use the analogy of you put a developer in the middle of a forest, they'll just keep chopping down trees until you tell them to stop. And what's interesting about that is recognizing or spotting leadership in those types of folks. So is there something that you use or a guide that you use for spotting leadership potential in others, especially around technical folks?
Yeah, I think the thing with like any kind of creative pursuit like software development is most of the success or fail kind of comes from that question of like, oh, am I in the right forest? Are we chopping in the right forest? Right? Like
Yeah.
this idea that if the developers can use AI to write code, we'll all be 20% more productive or something. It's kind of nonsense because the writing the code is not the limiting factor on how much impact we can have anyway. The limiting factor on sort of how impactful we can be for our customers is, are we working on the right things in a way that actually solves someone's problems? And AI probably isn't going to help figure that out so much. So I think what good leaders do, whether they're sort of appointed to a position or just naturally take it upon themselves, is they help to connect back to like fundamentally what does the customer need, what's the reason we're doing something, and then to create that clarity around of all the things we could possibly do, this is the next right thing to do that gets us closer to the thing that we're trying to do for the customer. And really, because I think the worst thing managers can do is fall into a trap of continually saying yes to all the things that can be done, because it's finite, right? And then the question
Yeah.
just becomes, can we hire more people? Can we hire more people? And like, we're trying to build a profitable company because there's a lot of benefits to doing that. So the answer isn't you can hire more people most of the time. And so, but it can't just be we keep saying yes to stuff and taking on more and more work. The art of management is really creating that clarity around, like, everyone on my team should be able to wake up with one or two key things, when they come to work, that I've had a good day because I made progress on this one thing and I know why this thing matters. And yeah, there's 100 other things I could have done, but I feel good about my day because I did that one thing. Versus, like, my manager's giving me 17 things to do. I don't know what the priority is, and I'm letting somebody down. I got 16 of them done, but I still let somebody down, right? Like, that's the job of the manager, is to figure out, or the leader is to figure out, like, that clarity, and provide that clarity, and push back, because I should be able to give that to everyone on my team, and they should be able to give it to their team, and it should be really clear.
I would classify that as like purpose and being able to be laser focused. And speaking of purpose and legacy relative to Octopus, what I guess one question I have is, what do you want Octopus to mean to the people who work here?
So I was saying at the start, like, we don't. There's no, like, long-term exit or thing that we're building towards. I just really love the thought that people are going to come to Octopus, hopefully for a long time, sometimes for a short time. I'd love them to look back at that time and feel like that was an inflection point in their career, and that Octopus is a great place to have come from. Like, they learned something, and it may not necessarily be that, it's. It may not even necessarily be that it's they had this, like, huge grueling challenge that they had to sort of, get really depressed about, and then, toughen up and execute and win those kind of growth opportunities, right? It might actually be something that's more like, you don't have to trade off, you know, being able to do good work and being nice to people. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like I would say, Harsh within our revenue team is a really great example of this. Everyone within the revenue org understands why they're here and what they're trying to do and the goals and everything. But Harsh also approaches it with a really high level of compassion for them and understanding of the challenges of the role. And it's not this, like, you don't have to be mean to people to get good performance out of them, which is, I think, the way a lot of people kind of view, like, the way leadership is supposed to work, or accept it as, that's the only way it can work. Like, high performance isn't a trade-off with being nice. In fact, that they actually complement each other really well.
Yeah. Yeah. It totally makes sense. If Octopus disappeared tomorrow, what impact would you hope it left behind?
I mean, I would hope the software's still running because people are doing production deployments for it. So, we've got to keep the cloud team going at least.
That's right.
To keep it running. No, look, I would hope that people, when part of the reason, I think, for focusing on this problem so much is I realized, when deployments are hard, people put them off. And because they put them off, the batch of things that they're deploying gets bigger and bigger. And you know what it's like, right? Like, you ship something and you added 3 new features, you fixed 7 bugs, you doubled the performance of this thing, but you also introduced a bug because it's this big batch of changes you've done. And you get remembered for that one bug that you introduced, right? You go over to the customer, you show them, here's release 2.0, and all they're doing is talking about you moved their chi, or that one bug.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you start deploying really frequently, yeah, one day you're going to walk over to them because you've introduced a bug and they'll be upset. But for the next 19 days, you'll walk over to them and tell them about that one new feature you added, that one bug that you fixed for them, and you get to be a hero for that one day. And so I hope, like, and we've seen it play out across so many of our customers. They go from deploying monthly to deploying weekly to deploying daily, and they go from being like, the IT team that just, is wasting time and they always ship bugs, to, like, the IT team as the enablers that, like, get invited to the sales kickoff, for their customers because they're a part of the team. I hope, even if people aren't using Octopus anymore, I hope they at least stick to that continuous delivery ethos of shipping small batches fast.
If every new Octonaut got, say, like a minute voice memo from you on their first day, what would it say?
Uh, I've never thought of that. I think maybe it would be something like, you know, through the interview process, I hope that we've given you a good sense of what to expect when you join, and um, you know, like one of the things I like to ask during interviews is to think about, 5 years after joining Octopus, what would they need to look back and say to feel like they had made a good decision at the moment they joined. And so, like, what is this is becoming a long voicemail now, but it would be something like, like what is that thing that needs to be true a few years from now to feel like joining Octopus was the right decision? And like, hopefully we had a good conversation about that during the hiring process, and so, hold us accountable to that, because it's really important that we fulfill our side of that, whatever it is. And yeah, after you've been here for 6 weeks or so, reach out to me, say hello. I'm genuinely here. It's a really flat organization. Just message me on Slack, like, to anybody who's joined, whether you've been here a long time or not. Happy to chat with anyone. And yeah, particularly if, there's anything we can improve, or, I'm all ears.
Awesome stuff. Let's wrap up with a few quick hits. These have come to you through the lovely support of ChatGPT. And feel free to go off the rails here, Paul, if you want to. So this is our rapid fire section. We're going to ask you a series of questions, and feel free to answer as quickly as you can. What's your favorite internet or internal Slack emoji?
It's the Homer Simpson dote, emoji.
Good answer. I like it. Who's someone at Octopus that always makes you laugh?
Liam is pretty good for it, and Nick Jazewski. He's
Yes.
just
Nick's hilarious.
Yep.
What Octopus value would you hypothetically tattoo if you could, if you wanted to?
Listening to our customers over following market trends.
Yep. We've got actually some little emojis for those who don't know about some of these things that we try to explain. If you had to explain Octopus to your kids, how would you?
They wouldn't.
How do you explain Octopus to your son? Do they care?
Yeah, they don't. Because by default, whatever I do cannot be interesting, right? I'm doing a talk at my kid's school in a couple of weeks, where I'm going to be talking about like leadership and stuff, and he's so embarrassed. But like, I know as a kid, like, I would love to hear from someone like me, but because I'm his dad.
Yeah, you're not an astronaut, dude. Right? You're a software developer. Come on.
Yeah, but like, well, I don't know.
Yeah. Favorite dev tool of all time?
I picked up some coding recently last year. I kind of jumped back into doing some feature work on Octopus just for a bit of fun. Man, TypeScript. Wow, what a difference. Like, going back when I last worked on Octopus, it was JavaScript. And but yeah, the combination of TypeScript and React is really impressive.
Nice, good answer. And what's the one thing you miss most about your early startup days?
Every day I made a decision, and I kind of knew by the next day, the next week, whether I made a good decision or not, because I'd build something, ship it, and I'd get some feedback from a customer. These days I make decisions, and a year later I kind of know if it was a good decision or a bad decision. I really miss like that fast feedback loop.
Yeah. No, good answer as well. Anyways, Paul, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us on the first edition of Life at Octopus, featuring those men and women who are behind the technology that you know and love. And join us for the next edition of Life at Octopus, at a episode coming soon. Paul, again, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.